Hi there. Welcome to Fundamentals of Insurance, Chapter 2, Insurance Contracts. So let's talk a little bit about what a contract is. It's an agreement between two or more parties that's enforceable by law, meaning legally binding. All contracts have at least 5 elements, and insurance contracts have an extra 3, so 8 in total. Let's take a look at each one of those elements all together. The first one is agreement. So there's got to be an offer by one party and then an unconditional acceptance of that offer by the other party. Now, in insurance, a contract can either be oral or it can be written and still be just as legally binding. That's why it's really important for you as the insurance broker to make sure that everything that you tell your insureds is documented as well. Now, the second part of agreements is consideration. And that's the exchange of something of value. So when we're talking about insurance, you could think of that as being the premium, for example. And the third element is legality of object. What that really means is that what you're insuring has to be legal. So you wouldn't be able to, for example, take out an insurance policy on TVs that you had stolen out of the back of a truck. You wouldn't be able to insure those. Now the fourth element here is legal capacity of the parties to contract. That means that all the people who are entering into the contract are able to do so. Now, the court of law considers some people to be not able to enter into contracts. That's going to be people who are minors, so under the age of 21, mentally incompetent, under the influence of drugs or alcohol, and trade names. Now, you're probably thinking, well, if I'm 16 and I buy a car, then I can totally go out and get an insurance policy. Yeah, you can. The law has deemed insurance as one of the necessities of life, so it's right up there with food and shelter. That's why minors who are under the age of 21, as long as they're legally of age to drive, can purchase insurance, and it's still just as legally binding a contract for them as it would be for anybody else who's over 21. Now the fifth element is genuine intention, meaning that all the parties meant to enter into the contract. Now, the parties can't be affected by things like concealment or mistake or duress, meaning you wouldn't be able to hold a gun to somebody's head and make them sign their insurance policy and have that policy be legally binding. So those are the 5 elements that are a part of every contract. Now there's 3 that are specific to insurance. The first one of those is going to be insurable interest. Now, if we're thinking about those 5 elements, I have an acronym for you, and that's going to be all cool ladies love to golf. I like to think that I'm one of those cool ladies. That's going to help you remember those 5 things. So if we take a look at insurable interest, that's all the people that financially stand to lose if there's a claim. So that could be the owner of the property, a mortgagee, a bailee, anybody who could be held legally responsible for damage to a third party's property or to their life or health. Okay? Now the next element is going to be utmost good faith, and we like to, in the insurance world, kind of think of that like honesty. Okay? The insured has an element of utmost good faith, so they've got to disclose all the information, they've got to tell the truth about the things that they're insuring, and the insurer has to follow through on what they're agreeing. They're being honest in saying that they are going to indemnify the insured in the event of a claim. Now you as the broker also have to have utmost good faith. You've got to forward on all the pertinent information to the insurance company, and you've got to act in good faith with regards to the actual insured. So you've got to kind of play both roles if you want to think of it that way. Now indemnity, that's the third element. That's the concept that you're neither going to come out ahead or behind after a claim. So the insurance company is going to put you back in the position you were immediately prior to the loss. And that's the whole concept behind indemnity. So I have an acronym to remember those 3 elements that are specific to insurance policies, and that's Ian's underwear is icky. IUI. Now, if one of those elements isn't there when it comes to insurance contracts, there's 2 things that can happen. The contract can either be void, meaning it's just like it never even existed, it didn't happen, or it can be voidable, and that means that the contract would be void as to the wrongdoer, but the person who's had the wrong caused to them has the option to either say, yes, the contract is going to continue, or no, it's not. So those are two concepts you might want to review a little bit later on, because they're similar words, but they mean pretty different things. So when we're talking about insurance binder, you may have heard that word before. And basically all an insurance binder is it's the contract you're promising that the insurance company is going to follow through and cover a risk, if you want to think of it that way. Now, insurance binders can be either oral, meaning that you've just stated that to the client, or they can be written down. And that would be maybe in the terms of like a temporary pink card, for example, would be a really good example of a binder. It's really important for you as the broker to document as much as you possibly can. That's going to avoid having an errors and omissions exposure, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that later on in the course, but I really want you guys to think of being a broker as everything you say is legally binding. So you need to document, document, document. So, so important. Now, your binding authority is given to you by the insurance company. That means that the insurance company is allowing you to bind the coverage for them with certain rules. And that binding authority can be found in your agency agreement. And that's what your book states. In real life, you're most often going to find that binding authority listed in the underwriting manual per se. Okay? It should contain the same information. Now, that binding authority is going to determine what types of policies you can write, okay, so the classification of the risk that you're writing, as well as the limits associated with that. So a really good example would be you have an insurance company that writes homeowners policies. In your binding authority, you as the broker are going to have the authority to bind them up to risks for $500,000, for example. So as long as the home value is under $500,000, then you'd be able to say, yes, this insurance company is going to cover it. You wouldn't have to check or get approval first before you do that. So it's going to be really important for you to know what your binding authorities are with each different insurance company that you deal with, and check on those regularly, because sometimes those do change. You as the broker, you're going to have to stay up to date on all that information. Now, every insurance contract is going to list off how it can be terminated. Okay? Now, it can either be terminated on the expiry date, so the end date of the policy, or it can normally be terminated by request from either the insurance company or the insured. Changes to insurance contracts are also going to happen, and those have to be done in writing. Now, the only person who can make a change to an insurance contract is actually somebody qualified and appointed by the insurance company. So you, for example, as the broker, you're not actually making a change to the insurance contract, you're just requesting that a change be made. The actual change is done at the insurance company's end. It's normally done by an underwriter. They make the changes and then they send out a copy of the paperwork or declaration page showing those changes both to the insured and you as the broker. Now we're going to talk a little bit about reinsurance, and you can kind of think of reinsurance as being like insurance for the insurance company. So basically what insurance companies do is they will take a portion of their risk that they have accepted, and then they're going to reinsure that with a reinsurance company. Now the contract between the insurance company and the reinsurance company is called a treaty. There are a bunch of different reasons of why people would reinsure, why those insurance companies would want to cede a portion of that risk off to an insurance company. And those are going to be that they either need to have more money available in their reserves, or they have a certain class of business that they would want to maybe spread the risk around a little bit. There's more information on reinsurance that is listed in your supplementary materials, so you may want to take a really good look at that before your exam. And that brings us to the end.